Hello again. This week we're going to have a look at something that you wouldn't possibly normally associate with me, and they're in this box. And the silver dealers and collectors amongst you probably know what's in this box from the shape of it. I won't prolong the tension, and here we go. Napkin rings. And you might think, well, I'm all about early silver. Why do I want to look at these napkin rings? But they've got something very particular about them that I want to talk to you about. And it's type of surface finishing rather than decoration that you sometimes get on precious metals. You will see it on silver occasionally. It's actually much more common on gold. And the first instance of it occurring is in sort of pre-Columbian civilizations when they produce gold work. And it's basically a technique of immersing an alloy of a precious metal, be it silver in this case. These are sterling silver. So they are 925 parts pure silver and 75 parts other metals, mostly copper. Obviously, when you look at gold, that varies wildly. A lot of the 9-carat gold that people purchase today and wear, only just over a third of that is actually gold. 2/3 of it nearly is copper. So, and that's why it often has, people call it rose gold. It has that sort of reddy look to it. Well, a lot of pre-Columbian gold was low-grade gold, but it looked absolutely sensational. It looked like pure gold, and you think, well, how did they achieve that? They didn't have electroplating in pre-Columbian South America, did they? Or did they? They had a similar technique, and it's called depletion gilding. And it basically means when you place an object that's been made of an alloy of a precious metal and another metal, the precious metal, the pure metal, may not react to a certain acid, but the other constituent parts of it, particularly copper, will. So if you make an acidic solution and you submerge an object that is, say, 9-carat gold, what will happen is very slowly, and you have to watch it, but very slowly, the acid will eat away all the copper in the surface of an object. I mean, obviously, if you left it there for a very long time, the thing would dissolve and you'd just be left with the gold. But if you submerge it for the right amount of time, it just eats away a few microns of the surface, but enough to remove all the impurities and leave a pure, albeit a matte surface of pure gold. Now, this was a technique that these pre-Columbians used on their gold work. Henry VIII famously got the nickname Old Copper Nose because when he debased the currency, he used exactly the same technique, but on silver. So silver coins, which had a high silver content, and that got lower and lower and lower, and they began to look muddy and coppery, they would be briefly immersed in an acidic solution. Not as strong as with gold, because obviously gold is more resistant to acids than silver is, but it would remove all those surface copper impurities and leave you briefly with almost a plating, but think of it more as a surface of pure silver. If you had a large flat object and that was a matte surface, you could then burnish it and polish it to a sheen again. Now, why is this important and what does it have to do with these napkin rings? Well, you see it in gold a lot in the 19th century. You see a lot of Birmingham gold work, commercially made gold work, particularly of the period 1840 up to about 1880, that favours classical revival jewels, so the so-called Greek and Etruscan styles, and it has this very lovely matte finish. And that's achieved by immersing low-carat gold into an acidic solution, and you get this bloom of pure gold on the surface. Sometimes it's burnished, sometimes it's partially burnished to give you a different texture. It happens less often with silver. Obviously, it happened with Tudor coinage. There is an account in the 18th century of a silversmith being brought to a grand residence prior to a banquet the day before to frost the silver for the banquet. Now, we don't exactly know what that frosting is, but I think it's reasonable to suspect that that was actually the brief immersion of the silver, cleaned and brightened up, to give it this frosted appearance. Now, as I say, it doesn't happen very often, but there is a period, I'll lift these up now, there is a period from about 1870 up to about 1900 when the aesthetic movement takes hold. And this is designs of geometric forms and naturalistic motifs, all inspired largely by Japan and Japanese ornament that's coming over in prints that themselves aren't imported for their own merit, but are the wrapping for Japanese ceramics. We didn't care for the ceramics, but we loved the wrapping paper. Was it ever thus? So you get this boom in the 1870s, particularly with silver, where for 30 or 40 years, all the decoration had been either neo-Gothic or it had been scrolling flowers and foliage in a very English manner. And suddenly you had this whole vocabulary of ornament, and it was quite dense, it was quite delicate, it was beautiful, to be honest. But the thing was, if it was on a very polished, shining silver surface, it was difficult to see. This is where depletion gilding or frosting comes in, and a lot of aesthetic movement silver with this engraved decoration was originally submerged in a weak acid to remove the impurities from the surface, making it very white, but also to matte it. It gives this lovely frosted, matted finish. The difficulty is, because that's only microns thick, it actually, if you use an object and you polish it with silver polish, that is quickly removed. So for years and years and years, I have been looking fruitlessly up till now for an example where they've never been polished, they've never been touched, where that frosted surface has remained intact for over 130. In this case, these are 1882, over 140 years. And, you know, thank goodness I found these, possibly a wedding gift. Often napkin rings are, or anniversary presents in the Victorian period. And somebody closed the box in them. You can see the lining is virtually mint. Never took them out, never used them. Now, they're little masterpieces of engraving, which is lovely enough in itself. But the thing I want you to see, it's not, there's a cartouche for an initial. They haven't even been engraved. Never out of the box. But can you see, and it's quite difficult in light when it's catching light, but can you see that frosted surface? If you had them under a lens, you'd see all the little pits and what have you, and that gives you tremendous contrast to the bright cutting, which polishes it. So all the engraving is polished by the engraver as it goes along, but against this matte ground, it sort of jumps to life. And these are by George Unite, made in Birmingham in 1882. Aesthetic movement silver is made all over the place. It's made in Birmingham. You'll see Chester mark pieces, which of course were made in Birmingham, but just assayed in Chester. You'll see very fine London work, often by Holland, Aldwinkle and Slater. And you will also see this profusely done on a lot of French late 19th century silver. They really were masters of it and went to town. So you'll see things, you know, commonplace things like cigarette cases, absolutely smothered, but all frosted, all on a frosted ground. But as I say, 3 or 4 polishes, and it's lost. I'll show you the other one as well, and you can see all this lovely aesthetic decoration. Stalks, bamboo, all lifted in little geometric bands and borders. And what's telling is when it was engraved, you see, they've even left a reserve so the hallmarks wouldn't interrupt the decoration. This is all about, the napkin ring itself is a bog standard napkin ring. It's all about surface ornament and surface decoration, but also this acidic finish, this frosted acid gilding, a technique that's thousands of years old, but really blossoms at the end of the 19th century with aesthetic movement silver. And if you've just seen polished pieces, you probably won't appreciate it. It really has to be an object that's remained in a fitted case since it was made and not opened and not polished. But it's a very interesting technique. You will see it much more on gold, because obviously gold doesn't tarnish in the way that silver readily does. So gold jewels that have been kept in a nice felt-lined jewel box, they won't have been polished, they won't have been cleaned, they will retain that lovely granular finish with polished areas within. But it's something that's not often talked about, it's not recognised, in particular with aesthetic movement pieces, and it makes the world of difference. These, sadly, because somebody else wanted them, cost an absolute fortune. And they did so not because they're beautiful napkin rings, though they are, but because of their state, because of their condition. Because even if you're lucky enough to find a very ornamented pair like this, they will now be polished. If you want them as the maker intended, you need to find them in the box. Good grief, I've gone on for over 10 minutes about a pair of napkin rings. I never thought that would happen. But they're fabulous things. And it's a very unusual technique. You tend not to get it in the 18th or 17th centuries. It's very much a thing of the late 19th century when it comes to British silver. And then it falls out of fashion again, because obviously it's a very ephemeral technique. It doesn't last. So, why bother in the first place? But at its height, when you find a piece, it's absolutely stunning. So do remember that. Look out for it. You might be lucky. Lots of wedding gift things do remain in their original cases, closed up and never used. So that was depletion gilding. I probably didn't think you'd hear those two words together, did you? Depletion gilding for this week, and a pair of napkin rings. Keep your eyes peeled. It's only taken me about 15 years to find these, so it should be no problem for you. See you next week. Good hunting and goodbye.